right, it's another film study. We're going to do a bonus episode, I guess, or what do we call these again, Ken?
A film study short.
Shorts. That's right. This is a short episode, and we're going to talk all about COVID protocol because COVID's been getting the attention of the NFL a lot lately.
Sure has. Obviously the cancellation's a very visible effort. We have Clifton Brown joining us from the Ravens, obviously writer and podcaster internal to the Ravens. Tell us a little bit about what you do for them, Cliff.
I'm a staff writer with the Ravens, have been for 2 years now, and obviously write for the website. You mentioned a podcast I just started last month called Black in NFL, so that's a new venture for me. And I covered the team for 4 years working for Comcast. At that time, it was Comcast Baltimore, Washington. Now, I think it just goes by CSN or NBC Sports Washington. But yeah, I was around the team for 4 years, left for a couple of years, and then in 2018 came back to work for the Ravens. So it's a good time to be around the Ravens. Obviously, the past couple of years, a lot of excitement about the franchise.
Are you a Baltimore boy originally, Cliff, or where did you grow up?
I grew up in Philadelphia, so no, I didn't spend any time in Baltimore until 2013. That was my first season covering the Ravens for Comcast as a Ravens insider.
All right.
All right. And then I guess we're going to talk more about your podcast kind of at the end because this Black in the NFL is getting a lot of attention, as it should be, because that's kind of the discussions just in the world right now, a lot of race discussions. And this podcast is really exciting and really impressive that the Ravens are putting this out there with you.
Yeah, I'm really happy, obviously, that work for an organization that is open to doing something like this. And yes, the time for it, I think, could not be more appropriate with some of the things going on in 2020.
Right. All right. Now, COVID's been all over the NFL lately. We could talk about the film study protocols, but Ken and I just record in a different state, and that's how we keep it safe. So let's get into some of the ways the Ravens do in the NFL and all of this.
Yeah,
so
well, I mean, go ahead.
Go ahead. I'm sorry, Cliff.
I mean, the facility, it's a lot different than it was last year, obviously, as all NFL team facilities are. For myself, I mean, where I used to sit and my desk is now, it's restricted for me. So I'm not in the building too much. I was during training camp, but, the whole idea is to try and keep everyone healthy. And I think we're seeing how difficult that is for NFL teams, for college teams, in all sports. This disease, as much as it's in the forefront of everyone's mind, it's just very, very difficult. You have to take as many precautions as you can. And I think the NFL actually, up to this point, when you look at it, it hasn't gone as badly as a lot of people thought it would. I mean, they've been able to get now, we're into week 6. We have had some cancellations, but really, I think you've got to give a lot of people credit for getting this far and setting up a situation where, the season for the most part has been able to go uninterrupted. But again, it's just what the whole country is dealing with. To think that there weren't going to be any players or coaches or staff members getting disease this year is just definitely unrealistic.
Yeah, especially given the size of NFL rosters relative to basketball teams, say, or even hockey teams. I mean, they're much larger groups of people, larger support staff, larger everything, frankly, and they're not playing in a bubble. So we would have been unreasonable to expect no positive cases. But let's get down to protocols for a second, Cliff. One of the things that I heard about was players coming to camp had to wait a certain number of days to practice.
Right. Right. I mean, once obviously when you were arriving from training camp or for training camp, you were dealing with a situation of players coming from all different parts of the country. So I think the first thing teams wanted to do obviously was make sure that before players entered the facility, they did not have the disease and carry it in. So that's what that was all about, to make sure, give players 2 or 3 days to be tested. And once those tests came back negative, then let them into the building. And I think you've seen, most notably in Tennessee, once you start getting cases in the building, then it can become difficult to try and deal with. So, yeah, I mean, The league has decided from the beginning that the only way really they were going to have a season is to test people very regularly. And at least once you find out if someone tests positive, then if you can isolate the situation quickly, then you don't run into a situation where it spreads through the team.
Now, that isolation you mentioned is handled by a system of contact tracing that's internal. And we saw a little bit of that on Hard Knocks. But tell us a little bit about what kind of a contact tracing device you have to wear around the facility when you're there.
Well, when I was there, we have three levels of tiers. Tier one would be players and coaches, and basically your players and coaches and people who deal with players and coaches every day. Tier two is people who come in contact with tier one people frequently, and then tier three is people who are in the building, but that's where I was at tier three. I wasn't allowed to be close to people in tier one or tier two, even though I was allowed in the building. So when I entered the building, I was given a contact tracer that would track my whereabouts in the building. If I accidentally came within 6 feet of anyone tier one to tier two, then my tracer would go off, warning me that I was too close to someone tier one or two tier, even if I didn't happen to see them, they might be coming around the corner, so that was just a way to say, okay, I need to back up. It wasn't so much that, I don't know, you'd be punished or vaporized if that happened, but it's to let you know you're getting too close to someone who's not in your tier. You need to social distance. So, yeah, I mean, it's just a new way of coming to work. Again, the building is a lot different. There's certain places where you used to be able to go, you can't. And yes, depending on what your tier is, you have to make sure that you stay away from those people. It's all to try and limit the possibility of infection.
So the tier 2 and 3 people at least would have to wear masks, I'm assuming, around the facility as well?
Everyone's wearing masks around the facility. That's kind of across the board. Tier one and tier two, obviously, they have access to more of the building. I mean, if you're tier one, you're a player, so obviously you're on the field, you're in the locker room, you're in the cafeteria. Uh, if you don't have to be in those areas, you're not there this year. And the building, there are fewer people in the building. There are a lot of people who have been working remotely at or not away from the castle since March. Once the building was first shut down, which was, I guess that was the second week of March, some people have never returned because they are able to do their jobs away from the facility. And the fewer people you have in the building, then, the better the chances are of limiting the possibility of infection.
Makes all kinds of sense. I wish, as a nation, we take it as seriously as all this to kind of get rid of this thing. Let's talk a little bit about the COVID list itself and what some of the rules are about going on and off it. So we're aware that players, if they test positive, they certainly would go on it. Is it also a contact issue that if they've been in contact with another positive individual, they would have to go on this list?
Well, once you test positive, then obviously they're going to want to know who you may have come in contact with, who else you may have come in close contact with. Once that happens, then I mean, players are getting tested every day anyway. But once someone tests positive, then you want to quickly find out if anyone else has gotten it from them or from somewhere else, and whether this is just an isolated case or whether you have to keep testing and find out that there's more and more. So, I mean, every situation is different, except that once someone tests positive, then obviously you're not allowed in the building. You're not allowed to be around the team, and they want to establish that as quickly as possible to try and keep the spread from happening. So, I read the situation in New England where they had actually two different planes going to the game in Kansas City. Once Cam Newton tested positive, they had players who had been in close proximity to him on one plane, separate from players who had not been in close proximity to him on another plane. So, I mean, I think it's really, we've seen so many things change, not only since the season started, but, depending on what the situation arises. We're all never dealt with this before.
Right.
It's always easy to, second guess once something happens and a decision doesn't work out right. Should they have played this game? Should they have handled it a different way? But it's uncharted territory for everybody. So, the league again, I think to this point to have gotten to week 6 where we are, is pretty impressive. We'll just have to keep our fingers crossed. Everyone to me is being as careful as you can be, but there's no guarantee that you can keep, COVID from being a problem.
There you go. In terms of the communications from the league recently, those got some attention when Goodell put out his latest memo about this. Uh, Obviously, a very hard line, but one where if the season is to be played, I think the NFL owners obviously feel that the protocols need to be strictly adhered to. How tough do you think that he's going to be in terms of coming down with punishments if there are further uh, breaking the rules, as appears to have happened with the Titans?
Well, I think that's a warning, obviously, as you said, for everyone else. If you're thinking about doing something during the bye weeks, most teams haven't had their bye week yet. So, now they're being very clear about, you're not allowed to leave town during the bye. Obviously, having unauthorized practices is something that you wouldn't want to do. Yeah, if I think that if there are instances where the rules are broken, I would expect the team definitely to be punished. They're being very upfront about it because that's really the only way to have a season. And with this disease, when you take a chance, you're not taking a chance just for yourself. You're potentially endangering the people you work with, your teammates, your family.
Hmm.
So there's every reason to take it seriously. Again, I think that coaches and players to this point deserve a lot of credit for you know adhering to the regulations. We haven't heard about a lot of instances, and you mentioned there's not a bubble, so every week you've got 14, 15, 16 teams traveling. Um, it's not an easy situation, but I think 95 or more percent of players, if probably more, higher than that, are really trying their hardest to do everything. But again, there's just no guarantees.
Now, 15 years ago, it was true, and I'm not sure how much the league has changed pre-COVID, that there was a large contingent of the NFL would fly into New York on Monday night as their day off, go clubbing there, and oftentimes with other people in the league. And I couldn't tell you whether it was 50 players league wide or whether it's 200 players league wide, but it's some significant number of players would go there on Monday night, and there would be a lot of activity there in New York uh, on that day. That's a really hard thing to ask young men who obviously have had some financial success now for the most part to stop doing something that they really enjoy doing on a regular basis.
Yeah, but I mean, to me, the risk isn't worth the reward. First of all, the season is going to be over if you're extremely optimistic. If you win the Super Bowl, your season is going to be over by early February. And you'll have from early February, really, other than, mini camps, to like July to party as much as you want to. So everyone going into this season, because COVID broke out in March, everyone who went to the NFL season knew what they were signing up for. That, first of all, there wasn't going to be a bubble, which is less of a sacrifice than the NBA and NHL players had to make, where a lot of those guys were away from their families for months. At least with NFL players, you can leave the facility when the day is over. You can go home. You can see your family. But yeah, I mean, I love Patrick Queen. He was asked, about hanging out like during training camp. He's like, hang out for what? Like, I've been waiting my whole life to be in the NFL. I'm here. I'm the starting inside linebacker as a rookie. I'm not going to blow this opportunity because I wanted to go to a party. I mean, sure, it's going to take some discipline for all of us, but that's not that important to me that I'm going to blow that opportunity for that. And I do believe that's been the approach that all players really across the board have taken because, again, they know, and it's always being reinforced now that if you're not careful, or even if you are careful, you can catch it. But certainly, if you're not, you're just increasing your chances of coming down a situation that you don't want to be in.
Okay, I think we've all considered the possibility of the NFL adding weeks, whether it's bye weeks at the end of the season or maybe a bye week during the season. Do you have any kind of insight into what the NFL might do in terms of adding a week? The point has been made many times that it doesn't help to go on a break and try and let COVID resolve itself during the break. You'll just have new outbreaks and it won't be any better. But in terms of adding a week, you still might need that because unlike baseball, for example, where you can stack up the double headers as they did for the Cardinals and other teams, you can't do that for football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only guessing, but if you got in a situation where we're through week 17 or approaching week 17, and you had a significant number of teams that still weren't going to be able to play a 16 game schedule if you stopped at week 17, particularly if you had some playoff contenders, then I would think that they would probably want to add another week, at least add games that had playoff implications. So, yeah, I mean, as we've had to cancel and I shouldn't say cancel, postpone games and move them around, the more times you have to do that, they're going to run out of wiggle room
Yep.
where either A, teams won't play 16 games, or B, they'll have to extend the season. So we're not there yet, but, it's probably getting close. But I think that, again, if you got this situation where a team had played 15 games and they were out of playoff contention, then I think this might be a year where you only played 15 games. If we got to week 17 and there were two teams in playoff contention that needed to play that extra game to determine who was going to make the playoffs and who wasn't, then we'd probably, see them try and add an extra week. But every situation is different. I think that they built the schedule so that they would have some wiggle room, but again, there's only so much.
Right. You and I both know that almost every NFL game coming down to the wire will have playoff significance for one team, which is the
Right.
problem. You got too many teams in the middle, too many teams playing for seeding, so you got all
Right.
that kind of stuff going on. There would be a question as to whether a 13-2 team wants to play that 16th game against a bad team to try and get that number one seed. But I think the league's going to have a consistent policy about that to get these games in. But in any case, I guess we'll see as the time comes on. The other thing I really wanted to ask you about this was we've seen a lot of cap manipulation, specifically from the New England Patriots, in terms of trying to move cap forward to 2021 because we're really facing a D-Day maybe you call it that, a doomsday for a lot of teams, the Philadelphia Eagles among those, who don't have cap space next year, and particularly with a reduced cap, will be, having to release a lot of players. There should be a lot of free agents on the market, and relatively few teams that have the dollars to spend. So having cap dollars pushed to next year has real value. So my question is this: what are you expecting to see at the trade deadline in terms of team behavior and willingness to pick up contract dollars?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe more than ever, you have to think about the contract, taking it on your books, making sure that that's a player that if he is going to squeeze you even more cap wise, that this is a move that you should make. So, I don't know, to give you a general answer like how much that's going to impact things. Maybe we won't see as much activity at the trade deadline because teams will be more worried about the financial implications. And, I mean, okay, if you don't make a move, then you're still not sure this year if are we going to get through the season?
There you go.
I mean, it looks like it. We all hope so, but maybe it does deter you from making a high risk, high cost move. This year, you might be more hesitant to do that, but I mean, it always depends to me too on what you think you can do this year when you get to the trade deadline. Are you a buyer or a seller? If you're a buyer feeling like, maybe I make this move now, it might make the difference between us taking a Super Bowl run or not. And if you're a seller, then yeah, I mean, you're looking to unload. This year, it might not be a great time to be in that situation.
Hmm. I agree. I think there's some players in the league who are already kind of poisoned in terms of their value. Le'Veon Bell was clearly one, in terms of having a contract which was too big for anybody to take on. I think AJ Green is probably another. Is that after what happened on Sunday and the restrained effort, let's say, on both of those interceptions that he showed, that he probably is going to have a hard time finding a home.
Well, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting with both of them. I mean, Le'Veon, obviously, to me, even though he didn't put up nearly the numbers with the Jets, I think that he's somebody who's got juice left in the tank. Um, so it'll be interesting to see if a team that needs a running back that's in contention will pounce on him. AJ, thing that's hurting him, yes, the most right now is that when he's been on the field this year, he hasn't looked like the same player. I saw that he had the hamstring or didn't come back. Now listen with the hamstring, maybe he hasn't been healthy out there, but whether he's been healthy or not, he has not looked like the same player this year that we used to seeing with AJ Green. So, yeah, I mean, what would compel you? I'd be asking myself, why would I want to, make a move for him based on what I've seen? If he's not healthy and he's not the same player, that's really going to hurt him.
Yep, couldn't agree more on that. Cliff, I want to talk a little bit more before we let you go about your podcast and explain to me what how the idea evolved and what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, I actually started approached the Ravens about the possibility of me doing a podcast after last season was over. Really before George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, some of the awful things we've seen happen in 2020. Before all that happened, I talked to the Ravens about the possibility of me doing a podcast, and then we kind of settled on, well, if I was going to do something different, something I could bring to the table, would be something like Black in NFL. And then, unfortunately, all these tragedies started happening, and we really felt like, okay, this is the time to do something like this. So the podcast is called Black in NFL. We've already dropped the first episode, which was called Shut Up and Play, which is a phrase athletes hear a lot, that they should just shut up and play. And the guests on the first episode were Robert Griffin III, Dr. Harry Edwards, longtime social activist, and Nate Boyer, a Green Beret, who met with Colin Kaepernick after he started protesting and convinced Kaepernick that it would be better for him to kneel, not sit, which was his original protest. And, I'm trying to come at issues from all types of angles. I just feel that in this country right now, there's too much divisiveness, not enough listening, and not enough communication. So, on all these issues, I'm going to try and get various viewpoints. The next episode is going to be entitled "To Kneel or Not to Kneel." We're going to have Calais Campbell on, who in London, when the Ravens played over in London against Jacksonville, Calais was playing for the Jaguars. We're going to have a Matthew Judon. He was playing for the Ravens and still is. He knelt in 2017 over in London. Calais Campbell knelt playing for the Jaguars. But I'm also going to talk to Ben Watson, who didn't kneel as a member of the Ravens. So we want to get all aspects. I've always been an inclusive person. I feel that these are things we need to talk about. The division between race, social injustice. It's obviously an issue for this country. And I think that I'm hoping that people will listen. And even if you don't think it might be the podcast for you, that after you listen to it, I think you might be surprised. And hopefully you will learn something and, definitely will make you maybe think differently about some of the issues that athletes are talking about so much these days.
Yeah, one of the things I was very impressed by earlier in this was, when the Ravens held the special meeting for practice one day or after practice one day, and they wanted to talk about these issues. One of the things that came out of that was, I think it was Chuck Clark talking about how, we realize we come from a lot of different backgrounds here, so we're not trying to have everybody speak with one particular voice. And
Right.
instead, we'd like the people to express themselves in their own way.
Right. First of all, you want everybody really to be honest about how they feel, to have honest conversations. That's how you really make progress. Two, sports has always been a place that I think has been more forward than a lot of the country in that bringing athletes from different people from different backgrounds together, that you have to work together in team sports to be successful. And even if you don't like the guy who's lining up next to you, or if you grew up completely differently than he did, you're forced to work with him to try and achieve the same goal. A lot of places, work environments, it's not like that. First of all, a lot of work environments are not diverse enough where you're working with people who are a lot different than you. And then even if you get past that, because of the nature of the job, well, I can do my job and you can do your job, and then we can just go home to our different neighborhoods. Athletes, sports forces people from all races, has always done that, to work together. And I think it's brought a lot of understanding, which is why throughout the history of sports, you've seen athletes speaking out. I think that's why. I mean, you have not only black athletes, but white athletes in the past, standing up for their teammates, because, hey, I know this man. He's a decent man. He just wants the same things I want. It doesn't matter. He doesn't look the same as me and didn't grow up in the same neighborhood as me. So again, I just thought having a podcast like this, and it's available anywhere you listen to podcasts, I think it's a way for us to have meaningful dialogue about something that, to me is very important.
All right. Outstanding stuff, Clifton. I think people really need to take a look at that. Josh, are there other things we need to talk about before we go?
We want people to keep checking out the website, filmstudybaltimore.com. Continue to go check out our podcast, and continue to go check out the Situation Room, as it's a different podcast feed for more Ravens talk.
Okay. And we have our normal schedule coming up. Since we don't know the exact date this will be airing, I won't try and give you that right now. But Cliff, we really appreciate you visiting us today. Thanks for the great COVID talk and what I think is a very important topic in terms of your new podcast.
Right.
Ken, Josh, thanks so much for having me. I enjoyed it, guys. Take care.
All right, thank you. And yeah, everyone should go subscribe to Black in the NFL and follow Clifton at Clifton G. Brown on Twitter. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
Bye.